Did you know? More than 40,000 people disappear every year in the Sahel, and 99% of the world has no idea. Secret maps show Burkina Faso is the biggest transit point in a multi-billion-dollar black market for people. Classified documents reveal burning trucks in the desert were not carrying cargo, they were carrying children, women, tagged like animals. Shocked? This is not history. This is 48 hours of hell that happened yesterday, and there was only one man who ordered it to stop: Ibrahim Traoré. His orders were clear: trust no one. Act tonight. According to United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, reports, West Africa has become one of the fastest-growing corridors for human trafficking, with victims often routed through Libya before disappearing into Europe and the Middle East. In 2023, multiple investigations confirmed that Burkina Faso was a key transit hub, its borders exploited by armed groups and criminal cartels. UNICEF estimates that thousands of children vanish across the Sahel each year, many never seen again. And yet, silence prevails. The international press covers fragments, not the whole. But that's just the surface. What happened in Burkina Faso, under the command of Ibrahim Traoré, was something the world did not expect. The rain struck Ouagadougou like a warning, thick drops splattering against the windows of the presidential command room. Power flickered once, then steadied. Inside, President Ibrahim Traoré stood over a military map scattered with red pins. Each pin was a confirmed staging post of a trafficking route: desert convoys, hidden warehouses, forged NGO seals. But these were not just dots on paper. To Traoré, they were wounds carved into the flesh of his country. He had received the call less than 6 hours earlier. An intercepted message revealed that more than 170 people, children, mothers, men, were being prepared for transfer, packed in containers, bound for markets no one dared name aloud. In total, the network was worth over $150 million. If his team failed, hundreds would vanish across borders within 2 days. Some officers urged caution. Mr. President, if you act now, you'll risk exposing the government itself. The leaks may be coming from inside our own army. Traoré's reply was cold, resolute. Then let it be exposed. Better shame in the daylight than blood in the dark. He gave the order, lock the files, trust no one. We move tonight. For decades, Burkina Faso had been treated as a pawn, its soil plundered, its youth stolen. But this was different. This was slavery reborn in the 21st century, and Traoré would not be remembered as the man who looked away. Troop carriers rolled into the rain-soaked streets. Communications went dark, encrypted. Outside the capital, convoys cut through the night like shadows. Every man in the mission carried not just weapons, but the unbearable weight of history. If they failed, Africa itself would be scarred again. As the engines roared, Traoré whispered to himself, not a prayer, but a vow. No minister, no merchant, no foreigner will ever again sell a Burkinabe child while I still breathe. Midnight approached. The operation had no code name, no written order, only whispered directives carried down from Traoré himself. Silence was its shield. On the outskirts of Fada Ngurma, headlights cut across the dust. Intelligence suggested this was the first checkpoint. A disguised humanitarian truck, loaded not with medicine, but with captives. Women pressed against the steel walls inside, whispering prayers in the dark. One child, barely old enough to speak, kept repeating a single word, Mama. Burkinabe special forces surrounded the convoy. The commander raised his hand. 3 seconds of unbearable stillness. Then, impact. Doors ripped open. The stench of sweat and fear spilled into the night. Gunfire cracked. In less than 7 minutes, the traffickers lay in chains, their cargo freed. Some soldiers, hardened by years of war, could not stop their hands from trembling as they lifted children into safety. But this was only the beginning. Intercepts confirmed more convoys were moving, 3 separate routes threading north toward the Malian border. Traoré's order was ruthless: Do not let a single wheel cross that line. If they escape, it is Africa that loses. Of forenoon, by dawn, skirmishes erupted across the Sahel highway. Helicopters hovered low, sweeping dirt roads where trucks tried to vanish into the desert. One captured trafficker spat defiance, shouting that his masters were untouchable, that money speaks louder than soldiers. When word reached Traoré, he answered through the radio, "Tell him this, Burkina Faso is not for sale. Not its land, not its people." Within hours, 2 more convoys were intercepted. Over 100 lives pulled back from the abyss. Yet, the largest caravan, rumored to carry nearly 70 captives, remained hidden. Its route was unknown, its protection strong, its financiers powerful. In the capital, advisors begged Traoré to pause, to negotiate, to wait for international backing. He looked each man in the eye and said, "Every minute we delay, a child's name is erased. I will not negotiate with ghosts." The storm was far from over. The final battle of this 48-hour crusade was yet to begin. The world thought the mission was over. News agencies, if they bothered to report it at all, framed it as a minor anti-trafficking raid in a poor West African state. But within days, documents seized from the smugglers' camps revealed something darker, something that shook even Traoré's hardened resolve. It was not only criminals in dusty trucks. Behind the shadows lurked men in suits, polished offices, and embassies with flags. The papers detailed bank transfers routed through offshore accounts in Switzerland, shell companies registered in Dubai, and cargo manifests masked as agricultural exports. These were not mere outlaws, they were tentacles of an international machine. And the most shocking revelation? Among the confiscated files were diplomatic seals, codes linked directly to Western intelligence contractors, and in one folder, a memorandum signed by a European official. Ensure discreet passage of assets through the Sahel corridor. Minimize disruption to trade routes. Assets. That was the word they used for human beings. Children reduced to numbers on a balance sheet. When Traoré read those lines, silence filled the war room. Around him, his commanders clenched fists. "So this is not just Africa's fight," one officer muttered. "This is a war against those who call themselves our partners." But Traoré did not flinch. He rose, slammed the documents onto the table, and declared, "Then let the world know. If they hide their crimes in darkness, we will bring them into the light. Africa will not bow." That night, state television aired the evidence. Burkina Faso did what no dependent nation had ever dared. It accused the very powers that preach human rights of fueling modern slavery. The reaction was electric. Across Africa, people erupted with anger and pride. From Lagos to Nairobi, from Dakar to Johannesburg, hashtags surged. Number Africa not for sale. But in Western capitals, outrage turned into fear. The narrative began to shift. Commentators spoke of irresponsible populism and unverified claims. Diplomats whispered threats behind closed doors, cut aid, freeze accounts, isolate Burkina Faso. The twist was now undeniable. This was no longer about convoys in the desert. It was about sovereignty itself. Could a small, landlocked nation dare to expose a global empire of exploitation? Could one captain-turned-president withstand the weight of sanctions, sabotage, and propaganda designed to crush him? The battle had only begun. The desert raid had been a spark. The leaked documents became the fire. But what came next was a storm, global, relentless, unforgiving. Within weeks, sanctions hit Burkina Faso like a hammer. Western banks froze transactions. Development agencies suspended cooperation. Aid packages evaporated overnight. Analysts in Washington and Paris predicted famine, unrest, and the swift collapse of Traoré's government. But they were wrong, because something unexpected happened. Ordinary Africans, farmers, traders, students rose to fill the vacuum. Markets that once depended on imported rice began sourcing from neighboring Mali. Engineers in Ghana sent shipments of spare parts to keep Burkina Faso's water systems running. Nigerian truckers drove convoys of food and medicine across borders, free of charge. It was as if the continent itself had decided, one of us is under siege. All of us will stand. Meanwhile, in the digital realm, the struggle intensified. Western media called Traoré a reckless populist and a military dictator. But African voices countered with raw footage of the raid, the liberated women, the seized documents, on TikTok, on WhatsApp groups, on YouTube channels broadcasting from cramped bedrooms. Young Africans shattered the narrative. They called Gaddafi a madman. They called Sankara a dreamer. Now they called Traoré dangerous. Dangerous to whom? Protests erupted outside French embassies in Dakar, Bamako, and Abidjan. Demonstrators held placards not in French, but in bold English, so the world would hear them: "Stop funding slavery." The West responded with familiar weapons: misinformation and division. Anonymous reports accused Traoré of exaggerating evidence. Pundits suggested the documents were forged by Russia or China. On one American channel, a commentator sneered, "Burkina Faso doesn't matter. It's a dust bowl. Why should we care what a captain says?" But millions were listening. In the halls of the African Union, usually paralyzed by protocol, the tone began to shift. Leaders who once hesitated to defy Western capitals now saw an opportunity to rewrite history. A delegate from Tanzania thundered, "If Burkina Faso falls today, who among us will be safe tomorrow? If we betray Traoré, we betray ourselves." Even beyond Africa, cracks appeared. Latin American leaders, long familiar with sanctions, sent messages of solidarity. In the Middle East, voices in parliaments asked why Europe condemned slavery in the 19th century but ignored it in the 21st, when profits flowed through their banks. And in Europe itself, the truth began to seep into the cracks. Activists in Paris, Berlin, and London held vigils with candles, whispering, "If he is silenced, his cause will outlive him." The struggle was no longer about one man or one nation. It was about whether the global South could finally expose the hypocrisy of the global North, about whether truth, once spoken, could ever again be silenced. And in Ouagadougou, Traoré knew it. Standing before a crowd of tens of thousands in the capital's central square, he raised his voice not just for Burkina Faso, but for the entire continent. Brothers and sisters, the chains are not only on our hands, they are on the minds of those who pretend to govern us. But chains can be broken. The day has come when Africa will rise, not as colonies, not as clients, but as nations free and sovereign. If we must endure hardship, so be it. Hardship is the price of dignity, and dignity is the foundation of freedom. The crowd roared, fists in the air. A movement had been born. The empire never sleeps. For every step Traoré took towards sovereignty, shadows moved against him. It began with whispers. International think tanks released reports painting Burkina Faso as a destabilizing force. Western media outlets, once indifferent, suddenly filled their pages with alarming headlines: "Dictatorship rising in the Sahel." They spoke not of the children rescued from slavery, but of democratic backsliding, of Russian influence, of security risks. Then came the currency war. Overnight, transactions routed through French banks stalled. Development funds promised years earlier were suspended. Multinational companies halted contracts, citing uncertainty. The goal was clear: choke the economy until the people themselves turned against their leader. But Traoré had anticipated this storm. He called a midnight council in Ouagadougou. Around the table sat farmers' representatives, engineers, soldiers, and community elders. The room was heavy with candlelight, maps, and urgency. "Brothers, sisters," he began, "they believe Burkina Faso can be broken with hunger. They believe we will crawl back to their chains. But our soil is rich, our sun is endless, and our people are not afraid." He unveiled a plan. Emergency grain reserves would be distributed village by village. A barter system would be revived where gold, cotton, and livestock replaced the foreign paper currency. Small solar grids, already tested in rural provinces, would be accelerated to keep homes lit without imported oil. And then came the most daring move, a call to the people. On national radio, Traoré's voice thundered, "If the West cuts us off, we will feed ourselves. If they block our money, we will build our own. If they silence our truth, we will shout louder. Let every Burkinabe know, you are not a victim. You are the resistance." The response stunned even him. In marketplaces, traders accepted grain and gold instead of CFA francs. Farmers organized volunteer brigades to plant double harvests. University students hacked together payment apps independent of Western servers. Even the diaspora, long scattered across Europe and America, began wiring support through underground networks. But the empire struck harder. Satellite reports warned of mercenary buildups in neighboring countries. Western advisors whispered promises of aid to Traoré's rivals. Weapons trickled across porous borders, feeding insurgents desperate to sow chaos. One evening, a convoy carrying medical supplies was ambushed on the northern road. Survivors swore the attackers had training far beyond local militias. These were professionals, a wounded officer gasped. It was clear the counterattack was no longer economic. It was military. Traoré stood before his general staff, eyes burning with both fury and resolve. "They want war in the shadows," he said. "Then we will bring it into the light. If they dare send mercenaries, let Africa see who commands them. If they dare starve us, let the world witness how we survive without them." The room erupted in a single cry, "La patrie ou la mort, victory or death." The battle lines were drawn. The world watched Burkina Faso, expecting collapse. Instead, something extraordinary took root. Farmers in Kaya gathered at dawn, raising their tools not as weapons, but as symbols of defiance. Women in Bobo Dioulasso formed human chains around markets, chanting Traoré's name. In Ouagadougou, students painted murals of a rising stallion, the emblem of the Burkinabe spirit, running free against chains that shattered into dust. It was more than politics. It was faith. Faith that Africa could rise. Faith that a small nation could roar so loudly the echo reached every corner of the globe. And while sanctions tightened, solidarity grew. Cargo ships from Asia docked with rice and solar panels. Convoys from neighboring Mali arrived carrying fuel and grain. Messages of support flooded social media. "We are all Burkina Faso." Traoré himself stood once more before his people. His words cut through fear like fire through dry grass. "They want us on our knees, but we were born to stand. They want us in chains, but we were born free. Burkina Faso will not be the last fortress. Burkina Faso will be the first torch." His defiance became a rallying cry. Across Africa, leaders whispered his name with admiration and unease. Across the West, strategists admitted what they would never say in public. A new chapter had begun. But here lies the deeper truth. This is not just about one man or one country. It is about a choice humanity must make. Will we remain silent while exploitation hides behind the mask of stability? Or will we honor the courage of those who fight when no one else dares? Because history is not written only in the palaces of the powerful. It is written in villages where mothers refuse to sell their daughters, in classrooms where children dream beyond survival, in cities where ordinary people decide they will not bow. Burkina Faso has chosen. The question is, what about us? For those listening in America, Europe, Asia, do not look away. Ask yourself, if a small nation with almost nothing can resist centuries of pressure, what excuse do we have, with all our wealth and freedom, to remain passive? The time has come to speak, to act, to share, because silence is not neutral. Silence is consent. So let Traoré's stand remind you. A fortress of freedom begins with one act of courage, but it survives only when courage multiplies. And now, that courage needs you. If you believe Burkina Faso's struggle matters, if you believe Africa's dignity matters, then share this story. Speak of it. Discuss it. Let the world know that exploitation will no longer be hidden, and that the fight for freedom in one corner of the world belongs to us all. Because in the end, it is not only about Burkina Faso, it is about every nation that dreams of standing tall, unchained, unbroken, and free.